So we are really pleased to welcome you in this webinar on how to empower consumer choice, the role of environmental labeling for food. We will explain you what will happen during this webinar, and with Sharon, we'll begin with a quick introduction. So during the webinar, you can ask questions in the chat, but we'll try to answer them in the end of the webinar. Please leave every question you have inside the chat, and it will be more easy for us to manage this way. The replay and all the presentation will be available on our site tomorrow. Sharon, it's up to you.
Great, thanks, Emily, and welcome everyone who's with us live or who's listening to this recording after the session. So along with Emily and the team at the Institut du Commerce, we at the Consumer Goods Forum are thrilled to have you with us today. So we are 400 companies, retailers, manufacturers, and their partners in about 70 countries around the globe. We're 56 CEOs actually on our board of directors at the moment. And so this big, large global network focuses in on the 8 topics that you can see here on the slide, and the area where I focus is on collaboration for healthier lives, and where the work around this nexus between health and sustainability comes together, and how we can help people to make that choice that's good for them and good for the planet. So that's who we are, and I'll pass it back to Emily to let you know about the setup of today's session.
Yes, so regarding Institut du Commerce, we are a non-profit organization. We accompany societal transformation of commerce in France, and we have 230 members, retailers, manufacturers, service providers, and institutions within an ethical framework respecting the competition law. ICR France is a member of ICR community. We have 3 pillars, which are retail, CSR, and supply chain. And this is on CSR thematic that we are working on environmental scoring. As a quick introduction, we wanted to explain why we have organized this webinar. We are all facing the planet boundaries, climate, biodiversity, energy, pollution and waste, scarcity of resource, and agro-food industry is both a cause of the problem, but also a major sector to bring solutions. And these solutions support the transition toward more sustainable diet and way of production and selling. For climate action, for instance, we can enable action reducing the emission of and developing carbon sinks. For biodiversity protection, we can reduce the use of pesticides, support more vegetable diets, culture rotation, use of the wider variety of seeds, protecting endangered species, and so on. And there is also the packaging circularity, for instance. Sharon.
One of the reasons and why it's so important to work on this agenda from a global and a local perspective, and why we're thrilled to partner with the Institut du Commerce, is that it is obviously a global challenge getting the right information to people to help them make this choice. And we absolutely know that we need to collaborate globally and locally on this key topic. And that harmonization, when possible, it is a challenge, but when possible, that is something that we would love to see if we can do. So I hope that all the learnings that you hear from France today, and that this is something that you can take back to your business, your country, and share them widely. That's really what we want to do. And then at the end of the presentations, I'll give you a little bit of insights into some of the work that Emily and myself do in France to bring this live into supermarkets and in digital e-commerce sites, and work with consumers in France, but in 10 countries around the globe on collaboration for healthier lives. So let's get into it, sharing of the learnings, and we'll come back to you at the end on how we hope to put this into practice on the ground.
Thank you, Sharon. You will get the presentation. So this slide just summarizes some of resources you can find in English, and they will be available for all of us. Regarding this webinar, we are lucky to have Camille Perrin with us tonight. She's a senior food policy officer of the European Consumer Organization, and she will present the consumer perspective on environmental labeling for food. And after that, Vincent Colomb, food product eco-design and life cycle analysis expert at ADEME, the French Agency for Ecological Transition, will present all the experimentation that has been done last year in France regarding environmental labeling. And we are really happy to have both of them with us tonight. In the end of the webinar, Agnès Martin, which represents our working group in France, will explain the role and contribution of collaborative retail organization, like the work we've done with CGF and Institut du Commerce. And Sharon will also explain the initiative of Consumer Health and Wellness Program in France. In the end, as said previously, you will have a session of Q&A from 6 p.m. to 6:15. So I hope everything is clear for everyone, and we will begin with Camille. So.
Yes, sorry, good afternoon. I was muted. Good afternoon. Thank you very much for the introduction, and thank you as well for the invitation to participate in this webinar on environmental labeling for food. Next slide, please. I'd like to start maybe with a few words of introduction on my organization, BEUC. So what stands behind this weird acronym? Well, we are the European Consumer Organization. We represent 46 national consumer organizations across Europe. And we bring their voice to the EU institution to defend the interests and rights of consumers in EU policymaking. We work on a range of areas, from consumer rights to financial services, through product safety and, of course, food. In the food area, we strive to ensure that all consumers have access to healthy and sustainable diets. Next slide, please. So to do our work well, we need to know what consumers expect, what are their needs, and also what are the obstacles they face in their lives, and how EU policy could help them have better lives. So 2 years ago, we ran a consumer survey on food sustainability in the fall of 2019. We wanted to understand better consumer attitudes toward food sustainability, if they are interested in eating more sustainably, what are the obstacles they face when trying to do so, and what measure they think could help them adopt more sustainable habits more easily. So do you see the report published there? It's available on our website. Next slide, please. I won't go through the detailed findings, but I just wanted to highlight a few of the results which are relevant to our discussion today. One of the key findings was that consumers want more information on the sustainability of food products. It was striking to see that many consumers tend to underestimate the environmental impact of their own food habits. They tend to quite accurately assess the overall impact of food habits. But when it comes to their own choices, they tend to underestimate it. They think that they are doing already quite well. What was encouraging is that 2 in 3 consumers we surveyed said they are open to changing their habits for the environment, so they are open to eating more sustainably. However, they face barriers when trying to turn words into deeds. And the first barrier is the price. There is this perception that eating sustainably is more expensive. Another obstacle was a lack of knowledge. They feel that they don't really know what is a sustainable diet. Also, unclear information was a problem for them. They felt that they could not easily see on the label which product is more sustainable. And also many of them said that they feel there is a lack of choice, of sustainable option in the shop or when they eat out. So these were the main perceived barriers to sustainable eating. And our survey also found that 57% of consumers want sustainability information to be compulsory on food labels. And this echoes a similar finding, or even higher finding, from a more recent poll by the European Commission. So it was carried out across the EU, which found that 88% of consumers would like sustainability information to be compulsory. I forgot to mention that our survey was carried out across 11 European countries, not the entire EU, but we made sure to have a good coverage of the geographical diversity of the EU. Next slide, please. So consumers want more information, but which information? With consumers increasingly concerned about sustainability, the market has started to respond. And what we've seen is that various actors, including retailers, food companies, but also some food tech startups, have started to develop their own labels. One of the problems is that there is no single harmonized definition of sustainability, what it means and what it covers, and sustainability has many dimensions. So what we see is that existing labels tend to focus on selected dimension of sustainability, and most generally they cover the environmental dimension when not just the carbon footprint. On the slide, you see a few examples of existing labels. For food, there are of course many more, but as you can see, some provide a single score to reflect the overall sustainability performance of the food product, while other break down the assessment of the product into separate ratings, which correspond to some priority impacts, such as climate or biodiversity, the water. You also see that some are color-coded, others not. So a proliferation of different labels creates a lot of confusion for consumers, especially when it's not clear to them what is behind these labels exactly. And at the end of the day, many consumers just wonder whether they can really trust these labels. So to ensure that environmental labeling for food can be meaningful for consumers, we developed some recommendations, and we put forward some considerations in this paper, which I will now introduce in more details in my presentation. Next slide, please. So first of all, a key point is that measuring the environmental impact of food has some great challenges. It's really challenging. One of the things is that unlike front of pack nutrition labeling, which simply translates some information that is already available on the back of the pack, environmental labels or scores for food reflect characteristics and properties which are generally otherwise invisible on the packaging. So for instance, information about the precise amounts and sourcing of ingredients, information about the production method, etc., is not available on the packaging. So this creates some challenges in terms of the transparency of the label, in terms of the ability to verify the information, but it also creates challenges for the development of such label by third parties, because they don't have access to the data that is needed to develop the labels. Another issue with measuring the environmental impact of food is the limitations, at least in our view, of the product environmental footprint method, so the so-called PEF method. So PEF is a method that was developed by the European Commission to harmonize the way life cycle assessment is being carried out and ensure that results are comparable. And it is generally the method that is recommended to perform LCA. The problem we see is, first of all, that product-to-product comparison is only possible where so-called PEF category rules exist. And so far, there are only a few categories for which such rules exist, including beer, dairy products, olive oil. Without such PEF category rules, you cannot compare products together. And for instance, products from different categories, say meat and a plant-based alternative, they cannot be compared together. A second issue we see with PEF is the fact that it lacks robust indicators for several key environmental impacts, including biodiversity, the effects of pesticides, notably on soil health, but also land degradation or deforestation. So this is also a major problem we see with PEF. And the third and fourth concern I would maybe group them together, and it's the fact that PEF takes a product-based approach, meaning that it focuses on the impacts per kilograms of products, so whether crop or livestock, but this is without considering positive externalities and ecosystem services, such as, for instance, carbon storage. And doing so, it tends to favor more intensive forms of agriculture. And on the other end, it tends to represent less well the benefits of more extensive systems or of organic agriculture. And finally, the last issue with PEF is that has to do with the cost to obtain the data needed for its calculation, and it can be a deterrent for smaller producers. Next slide, please. Also, crucially, the development of an environmental label for food implies some methodological choices which implicitly favor certain visions of the food system. Here on this slide, I'm quoting some very interesting work by IDRI. They have recently published a report where they unveiled the diets and visions of the food system behind different environmental food labels. Concretely, they have studied the Eco Score and the Planet Score, which are two of the labels that really that have emerged as serious contenders in the French experiments, and they have tried to identify the policy visions behind these labels. What IDRI found is that both labels converge in encouraging a reduction of animal product consumption. However, they differ in the evolution of the consumption of different animal products. So for instance, the Planet Score, which takes a more agroecological approach to the food system transition, the Planet Score tends to encourage more the consumption of bovine meat compared to the Eco Score. And this is because in the agroecology vision, the agroecology prioritizes the complementarity of crop production and animal rearing from extensive systems to reduce the use of synthetic fertilizer. Another difference is that agroecology tends to prioritize the biodiversity elements, and that's why the Planet Score in the way it has been built better discriminate between animal products from different agricultural systems, so conventional versus extensive or organic. So from our perspective, it's really important that this methodological discussion, that these different visions that in fact underpin different types of label are openly debated, and that consumers are involved in the discussion. Next slide, please. Now, about the, let's say, the boxes that we think any meaningful label should tick. First, and this is also based on our experience with nutrition labeling, to be trusted and seen as credible by consumer, it is essential that any environmental label for food is transparently developed. So the detailed methodology of the label must be available, and it has to be clear which are the organizations behind this label. And even better for consumer trust is that such label be developed by authorities. Another important aspect is that labels with interpretive elements such as color coding have proven to work best with consumers, particularly lower socioeconomic groups. And on top of that, colors also have to attract consumer attention to the information in the first place. It is also very important that when manufacturers or retailers decide to use this type of label, they use it on all their products and not just on those that achieve good scores. The third element, which is a no-brainer, is that any environmental label for food should be based on solid evidence. It should be developed based on rigorous independent science that is conducted free from conflicts of interest. And it's also important that the label be first tested with consumers. That is that it can be verified that consumers can correctly use the label and classify products based on it. Fourth, it's also important in our view that any environmental label for food allows comparing products within a category to distinguish between the different agricultural systems and practices, but also across food categories, for instance, plant versus animal source food. And this is because such labels should support the shift to greener diets, that is diets which are more plant-based, as experts recommend. And finally, it's also necessary that such label be accessible to all types of businesses. So it means that means that a balance has to be found between the accuracy and granularity of the label, as opposed to the use of more generic data, which is less precise but perhaps less costly for businesses. Next slide, please. So what is the policy context? There are two policy initiatives at EU level which potentially could have some, which are linked to this issue of environmental labeling for food. The first is that as part of the Farm to Fork strategy, the European Commission has announced that it will develop a new sustainable food labeling framework. It will be part of a broader initiative on sustainable food systems that we expect by the end of 2023. We don't know much at this stage, to be honest, except that it would cover the nutritional, climate, environmental, and social aspects of food products. So it's a lot, it's very ambitious, but it's in the preparation phase. And the other initiative that may have some impact on environmental labeling for food is the upcoming proposal for substantiating green claims made by companies, which is expected by the end of March 2022, so in a few months' time. To tackle greenwashing, the Commission will require that companies making green claims should substantiate these claims using, we think it would be what the Commission will propose, using the PEF methodology. So we are wondering, what if, for instance, the Eco Score, the Planet Score, or any other label is green? Would this be considered as a green claim? And would that mean that it should then be based on the PEF method, knowing that we have some concerns with this method for food and agriculture? So this is still an open question. We don't have an answer yet. Next slide, please. And just maybe to conclude, on my two last slides, I wanted to expand a bit the discussion beyond the environmental labeling per se. It's all good and well to provide consumers with scores that rate the green performance of product, but if at the same time consumers find messages that tend to present a product as greener than it is, it's not really helpful at the end of the day. So we see that green claims have started to mushroom on the market, and here on the slide I've shown a few claims related to carbon, CO2 neutrality, climate control. No foods can be climate neutral, and especially not meat and dairy. In all cases, these are claims based on offsetting schemes. So there is a lot of greenwashing, consumer misleading in this area. So what we are calling for is a pre-approval system for green claims, modeled on what exists already for nutrition and health claims. And so we will see what the Commission will propose in a few months' time. Next slide, please. And this would be the last slide in my presentation. Even beyond labeling, what really has been shown to influence consumer food choices is what is called the food environment. So these are all these influences, all these nudges in our daily life that push us to choose certain foods over others. It can be the price of food, marketing, advertising, even the way the groceries are laid out in your local shop, or it's also about the promotion in the stores. So there is now a lot of evidence that just relying on consumer choice and individual responsibility will not be enough to shift the food system onto a more sustainable path. So we really think that action is needed at various levels, so including regulation, to make it easier for consumers to adopt healthy and sustainable diets. So I will stop here, and I will be happy to answer to any question in the chat. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Camille, for your precious insights and recommendation. The Q&A will be taken in the end of the webinar, but you can answer indeed in the chat. And if you have documents or links to share, please don't hesitate to do it. So we'll pass to the ADEME presentation with Vincent Colomb.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you, Camille, for setting the scene. My presentation is very much, I can start from Camille challenges and situation. We really share the context. with Camille, and we've been working in France for the last almost 2 years on how to move on and to bring solutions to challenges. And I'm very happy to share with you our conclusion and where we. So I'm Vincent Colomb. I'm working in the department in ADEME. I'm an expert on the LCA and now coordinating the labeling scheme.
Vincent, I'm sorry to interrupt, but there is a sound problem. Maybe, I don't know if it's just me.
The slides are not moving here.
The slides can move, but it's just your voice. Sometimes it's a little bit cut.
Okay. Sorry, I'm not sure. Is that fine or?
It seems to be better. Maybe
Okay.
Don't move anymore.
Okay. Please just interrupt if I need to repeat something. Well, just a very quick word about the French environmental agency ADEME. So we belong to the environmental ministry and the research ministry, and we work on many topics, mainly on energy, climate, waste, and also sustainable production and consumption. And this work on labeling is focused more on communication and support for policy making. So why we work on this eco-labeling scheme? Well, first is there's a strong political will in France to bring these topics forward, and there are several laws that are published lately. Of one that's called circular economy law that was replaced by climate law. This is also was highlighted by the climate conference by the citizens, and everyone has been highlighting the role of better information about climate and sustainability in general. So there's really willingness at the policy level to frame this topic. We have tools that are now available. So we have LCS databases, we have the PEF, and so on. And what we observed was even before that we launched this national experiment that we have several private initiatives that are developing rapidly. And basically our question is not really, will there be an eco-labeling scheme or should there be, but it's whether the public bodies and the stakeholders are able to build some harmonized scheme like Nutri-Score to help the companies and the consumers with clear information. So there are two political aims that are clearly defined at the beginning of the experiment. That the final scheme should help promote eco-design, so support the evolution of production systems, and at the same time help consumers to choose more environmental friendly product and have a global vision about their food consumption. So the idea is really to avoid, as I said, to avoid the multiplication of private schemes, cost inefficiencies, and also loss of trust from all the stakeholders. We had a lot of content that has been developed during the late 2 years with 19 private projects. So EcoScore, PlanetScore are some of them. We had several group of experts working on specific topics. So like how to build the indicators, how to work on the formats, but some lab experiments with the INRAE, with the French Research Agriculture and Institute. That we invite consumers to test and to make like tech shopping in the lab context to see how bringing an EcoScore is changing the behavior. We have a big scientific committee that has been working also in an independent way, and so on. And that's all this knowledge and this content that has been bring together with two reports, one from the scientific committee and one from the government and the ministries and ADEME. They are being published, they are now in the final run, and they will be published in the weeks. There are already drafts that are being shared right now in the stakeholders, and the official publication will be by the early February. So here are the key outcomes I can share at this point. Well, the first clear point is that an official environmental labeling is strongly welcomed by the consumers. All the tests are showing there is demand. Camille also said it. The fact that bringing an eco score is really improving the environmental balance of the consumer food basket. So that's result from the lab experiment in particular. So where they compare how is the impact of the food basket without the eco labeling scheme, and we see we can get to about 5 to 10% of environmental improvements, which is significant. It's a key that we have a system that enables to compare within and between categories. And why it is key to have those two aspects is if the only way that we have the maximum environmental benefits, and at the same time, we don't induce extra costs for the consumers. So if we do not allow comparison, for example, between categories, we can have some environmental benefits, but it's only the product which are more expensive that will be encouraged. So this at the global perspective is not optimal, we observe. It's also important to have an harmonized scheme for the producers and the consumers. And it's important to see the schemes from the beginning with compliant with the European level. And finally, we are convinced that this, like the Nutri-Score, has been really important for the industry and the consumer, that it has the same potential from a A short focus about the indicators. So there's really an agreement in France that scoring should go beyond the climate and carbon indicators and include other aspects such as water, soil, biodiversity. That the LCA and PEF framework are the most sustainable to work on this kind of labeling scheme, but some adjustments are really needed to the current limitation on PEF. So we really agree with the BEUC on that. And those adjustments should be limited to really a set of topics that are really relevant, which are the local biodiversity of the field, the ecotoxicity and toxicity indicators. There's a concern about the single-use plastics that are not always well reflected by the PEF, the topic on carbon storage, and finally on biotic resource depletion. That's really the focus. For the rest, we should not add more and more indicators that could not be so science-based. Those adjustments are key to better assess the farming system, and in particular the extensive and organic production. The modification of the PEF need to be really transparent, remains the LCA framework as much as possible. We should avoid to bring some bonus malus that are not based on scientific evidence. There's been also quite a good discussion about the aspects that are not strictly environmental, but that are relevant for the consumers, such as animal welfare, GMOs, worker conditions. The consumer says they are interested in this topic, but we really recommend not to mix with environmental labeling to avoid confusion. And finally, while we think we need to improve the PEF and the LCS framework as much as possible, but it's possible that with these improvements, we don't highlight enough regarding some political aim, some category of product and so on. And then in that case, the only solution would be to bring from outside some bonus that are reflecting political priorities that are not really science-based, but political priorities. That in that case, that should be transparent and explained as it is. One word about our LCA database. So that's the French LCA database that are covering the products. It's really been an important tool, as all the projects have been using it in some ways to develop eco-labeling schemes, and we are convinced we cannot develop a broad-scale labeling scheme without some default data, such as the Agribalis database that we have in France. I'm not going to go into the details, but it's a basis that we go with some default environmental values for all the foods that are consumed in France. Right now, it's at the category level. It's provide values for bread, for cheese, but not for any single brand. And the challenge for eco-labeling is to go from this average category data to a really market product data. A few words about the implementation. So how do we move forward? So now we have the proof with all those testing and those projects that it's possible to make broad scope and low cost scoring systems. The experiments show that they managed to make some systems that are about €1 per reference, per benchmark. So it's really acceptable to make the calculation. We need the database, such as Agribalies. The schemes need to be available for big companies, but always for SMEs. And in order to get this possible, we need really a semi-specific, semi-generic approach with some flexibility. And the idea is really to say we have a level 1 for information where we'll go from generic data and specify only the key parameters that are publicly available, that are important. So like the recipe, the packaging, the origin, and the production system. And then we offer the possibility to go for more details, so with more data demand, more expensive, and to go level 2 and level 3. And considering that everyone should be able to provide level 1, and for only the companies who want to go for level 2 or 3, they should be able to do it. But if they do it, they will get, of course, that's the level that should be used for the communication. And also to implement that, we need some calculation. Last point is about the formats. In a way, that's the easy part. There's been a lot of testing, and also we have the history with the Nutri-Score. There's quite an agreement on that the labels should be really prescriptive, color, full, very straightforward, and the very clear information that can be understood in a few seconds. And then at the same time, if we want to bring a bit more information and to build trust, we can go to the next slide. So we need to have this aggregated, colored, and prescriptive format, and at the same time, also as a consumer, to get some trust, and also to get some pedagogy, to give some sub-criteria where we could explain more about the resources, biodiversity, and climate, and also bring online information to explain how the score is built, and to bring some maybe more concrete information for the consumers who want to know more about the. So this is my final slide. So we don't have today a fully operational scheme, but we have a clear roadmap after 2 years. Basically, we need what we need to do for the PEF adjustment. So we need to make the testing and the finalizing of the scoring algorithm. We need to build the calculation tool that is enabling this algorithm, to validate a final communication format, and finalize a control and review scheme. There is a need for political discussion to go on at the national and the European level. And finally, the aim is to have a validation by the government and an implementation in 2023. And all this work and really work transparently. And if you want more, you can go on the ADEME webpage. In French, for now, we are translating the key reports. So as a final word, what I'd like you to remember from my presentation is that really we've been working really a lot 2 years, and we have now a strong experience, I think, and a good vision about the possibility and the limits of these eco-labeling schemes. We are convinced that public, affordable, and reliable scheme is feasible, and we will test it in the coming year. And we really want to benefit this experience at the European level. And we are also now in a phase that we will be happy to discuss for European cooperations. I'm happy to see if you have questions, and maybe to work together in the future.
Thanks a lot, Vincent. Thanks for sharing all this work with the audience today. It's true that for us, it's the first time we talk about this kind of subjects with the CR community, and it's not the first time for Sharon at the Consumer Goods but we think it's a beginning of new works we can do together. So we'll be pleased to share and to help sharing what's going on with ADEME in France with other partners all over the world. So the last part of this webinar is just totally linked to the two first parts. It will be from a company perspective, and it will be Agnès Martin from Danone, which will share what we've done at Institut du Commerce and with CGF during last year, and especially how we have tried to cooperate on what has been done with ADEME, showing a point of consensus and point of vigilance. And Agnès, it's up to you. You can go on. I don't hear you.
Yeah,
yes,
it's okay. I was on it. Thank you, Emily, for giving me the floor. So I'm very happy to be here on behalf of the different companies who took part in this working group. And as Emily said, we were very keen to follow the work which has been done by ADEME during specifically during the last year, and to look at what proposal that was made and see how we could, let's say, build our own philosophy and our own principles, and maybe highlight some specific challenges that we can face as a company. So next slide. So of course, if we, as a company, we start from what consumers are expecting. So on the next slide, you will see other data that are fully consistent with what has already been shared by the fact that consumer wants to make more sustainable purchases, specifically in the food era. And then now in the food era, they are very confused because a recent study have shown that there is more than 460 different specific labels on foods regarding sustainability. So for consumer, you can understand that it's really become a nightmare, and that they are very, in fact, interested to get information which is much more meaningful and which is global, integrated, synthetic, that can be really encompass the full impact and can be easily understood by consumers. So next slide. So as I was already said, a lot have happened during the last 3 years on the market. So on one side, we have seen different schemes appearing on apps, on different labels, on different packs, or even in France for the experimentation. On specific brands, we have seen, you may have seen in your own market that some brands have started to label specifically the carbon footprint of their food products. And on the side, on the retailer side, we have seen a lot of appetite from big retailers to implement this kind of environmental scoring in order to help their consumer shift to their purchases toward more sustainable choices. So you see there's a lot. And next slide. We have seen on our side that 4 main, let's say, options that has been that became visible during the last year. On one side, there is some only LCA-based schemes, like the Eco Impact scheme, which appeared in the UK under the support of Earth Foundation, which is also now testing another one called Enviroscope, which is coming from a European initiative. And on the other side, we have seen 2 other options coming in France, like EcoScore that we already mentioned, and Planet Score. Both of them are LCA based, plus having bonus malus, which are correcting the LCA score. And they base the LCA approach from AgriBalise, but they adjust the score, the LCA score, with different bonus malus approach. So now if you look at what's happened, if you cross those 2, you will see that, in fact, in terms of, there is a very busy mapping showing that the different schemes, in fact, are starting to be tested, implemented in different countries under the impetus of different retailers of brands, and involving a very large variety of companies, but also third parties like NGOs. So it's really time. In fact, when you look at this picture, which is very busy, you really understand that it's really time, in fact, to work all together in the same direction to come up with a harmonized proposal, as was already highlighted by Vincent from ADEME. So that's why, in fact, we have decided to work all together, and we're starting to watch in a very detailed manner at the work done by ADEME, and to evaluate the ADEME proposal and to see whether it could be operational for a company like us or not, or under which condition it could become operational. So this is what I'm going to share now. So what we have done first is to try to create our own framework, our own philosophy, and on one side to define what should be the objective of this philosophy. So I think the first objective is clearly is to create transparency toward consumers, because we know that it's a really big condition, a necessary condition for trust. And beyond transparency, the idea was really, as mentioned Vincent, that we on one side need to empower consumers to make more sustainable choices, but in an informed manner. And on the other side, we really need to incentivize food companies to make eco-design for their product, whatever it's on farming practices or other production practices. So based on this, we have defined some guiding principles. So the first one is that we wanted to get a holistic approach, meaning that we didn't want to get just a carbon footprint labeling, but really a holistic environmental impact assessment, and that it should also cover a full range of food products. The second principle is that we want to get a robust scheme, which is science-based, also transparent on how the calculation is made, and easily accessible, in order to give the opportunity to any kind of company to be part of this movement. The third principle is to get a consumer-friendly approach, to be sure that what we provide in terms of information is clear, meaningful, and understandable for consumers. And not but not least, we need really a harmonized approach across actors and across countries, specifically for Europe. And then it should, at the first step, show voluntary, and depending of local legislation, it can become mandatory. But I think that the first step should be to propose a voluntary scheme. So in order to be a little bit more precise, what we have done is we have worked, in fact, using the conceptual framework that was defined by ADEME to build their environmental labeling proposal, starting from the objectives. And then from the objective, you define your methodology. So methodology will need data to make the score. And then we will then need to translate the score into a logo that is really meaningful for consumers. So I will go to each of these building blocks to then describe what we mean at each level. So regarding the two objectives, we were fully aligned with the ADEME proposal, meaning that we need to get a scheme that allows comparison within food category. I mean, eggs coming from conventional production versus organic production, because it's really a way to incentivize eco-design by producers. And in parallel, you need to get a tool which is allowing comparison across food categories in order to foster dietary shift by consumers. In terms of methodology, we are also absolutely aligned with the fact that we need a scheme which is, let's say, inclusive in terms of food range representation with a simple and relevant classification. We need to rely on a multiple indicator, not going beyond carbon footprint. Functional unit by default could be mass. We know that there is a lot of discussion, but we also saw that for the food service, as an example, functional units like portion could be relevant. So something that we need also to consider for the next work. In terms of methodology per se, we have fully agreed that LCA is the best base that we could use. And referring to the product environmental footprints European methodology. But as Vincent said, we also have identified some needs for improvement or adjustment of this PEF methodology And I will go into more detail in the next slide. So regarding PEF, it was mentioned by Camille that PEF, one of the background of PEF is to have been built on category rules, which are specific methodology for specific food categories. But as far as we want here to compare categories of food across categories, it will not be feasible with PEF. It means that we need to adjust PEF in order to create a single simplified approach, having just 2 categories. One could be for foods, whether they are solid or drinkable foods, and maybe one for beverages, because we know that it's quite different in terms of function for the human body. So this is the first thing that we really need to evolve the approach of PEF category rules to allow this cross-category comparison. On the other side, we have identified also that we need to evolve LCA and PEF to cover the blind spots that they don't cover well, as I said, Vincent, and because we know that it's not reflecting well the farming practices, as an example. And we consider that this could be done, and I think there is a problem with the visual. It could be at short term, but using some complementary indicators implemented after the global LCS score, and a solution that could be done at short term. But we know it's not ideal. So we also consider that this adjustment could be done within the LCA PEF methodology by adjusting the different parameters of the calculation. So next slide. So regarding the data, we also are fully in line with what ADEME is saying in this report, that the best solution should be to make calculation with specific data coming from the companies, as far as they are certified. But we know that it's costly and not necessarily accessible to any type of company, specifically small and medium enterprise. So a semi-specific approach, which is combining generic data with specific data like recipes, could be a good compromise to generate reliable data. But it means that we have at least a basic database, generic database like Agribalis, which is reliable and rich enough in order to provide all information we can need for the calculation. A need that we have identified is the fact that companies need to get a secured online platform where they could enter their own data under confidentiality condition. And this platform could also make the calculation of the score for the company in a standardized way. And it's something that is very important in order to secure the confidentiality of the data of the companies. Regarding the score, we fully agree that one global score is probably the best information we can give to consumers, but potentially additional sub-scores, like a score about climate impact, biodiversity loss, or whatever could be, let's say, meaningful for some consumers. And once again here, regarding the global score, what we need is a publicly available online and secured database in order to be sure that any actor that wanted to display this score on its own app or whatever is using reliable information, which has been calculated with the data from the company and has been, let's say, validated by the companies. And last part, that form of expression. So we also align with the proposal from ADEME, having a prescriptive scheme using a scale, and the number of level is still to be defined. It could be also added with letters or numbers, and also color coded. And regarding the place of expression, of course, PAC seems to be the best place to display this kind of information, but it's true that as a food company, we have a concern about the space available on the PACs, because we have many things already that we need to display. And we also will face probably some challenges regarding the updates of the scoring, because it might change quite rapidly by changing sourcing of ingredients or changing packaging, whatever. And we know that the update of the packaging will only happen every 2 years or 3 years, and we might face some discrepancy between information on pack and information displayed somewhere else. So our recommendation is to start with a digital tool in terms of display of information, and then to evaluate the capacity to that also on pack, but it's going to be much more difficult. And finally, another comment is that we know that we have seen that even though consumers are very interested by this kind of sustainability information, they are not well equipped yet on that, and their level of knowledge is quite low. So clearly we need to create awareness and understanding in the general population about this kind of information. And it means that communication campaign will be necessary, as it has been done in France with Nutri-Score, to really engage anyone in this kind of communication. So to sum up, I would say that the member of the task force of the Institut du Commerce are very supportive of most of the ADEME proposal, whatever it's in terms of objective, methodological framework, harmonization across actors and countries. And we just have flagged some watch out that are here really to maximize the chance of success of this scheme, at least in France, with this PEF adjustment, with some condition for company implementation, knowing that they have limited resources in terms of human, technical, and financial capacities, specifically SMEs. Once again, the confidentiality aspect is important for our companies. And also the reliability of the publicly accessible scores is very important. And finally, we need to empower the general public to understand and make the best of this information. Thank you.
Thank you, Annette. So a lot of challenge for everyone. Sharon, can you explain what has been done with CGF?
Yeah, so what we've, thank you. And you can see the huge amount of work that's happened in France, and what we have tried to do is create an enabling environment to bring that to the market. And you can see here 10 of the countries where we have on the ground activations with retailers and manufacturers and local partners to try and see how we can get that impact through changes in the basket, like Vincent mentioned, and like Camille mentioned, to go beyond just the power of information, but really look at the entire enabling food environment. And one of those projects that we co-created with Emily and the team at the Institut du Commerce is in France, and the project is called On s'y met, where we're in our second wave of testing how we can really integrate and drive healthier and more sustainable choices in the basket. So this has all evolved, and you can see the speed and the amount of work that's happened in environments. You can go to the next slide, Emily. You can see that we ourselves at the CGF are evolving our Healthier Lives agenda because we're really looking at the impact of the diet on the planet, helping customers with that demand for change that they want to make. So we've created a new vision and a new mission within our Collaboration for Healthier Lives Coalition of Action. And you'll see here we really want to work on, of course, helping people with information, but ensuring that the taste, the affordability, and the accessibility of all of those products remains something key that we do. So we have an objective this year to go live with a number of different pilots to bring these interventions to life. And you can see here an example from the UK, where of course labeling is an important part of what we try to do, but we also work on reformulation, nudging, and inspiring. And we have a group of core members with the team, Agnès and Danone, Sainsbury's, Pepsi, General Mills, Ahold Delhaize, Migros, who have come together to kick off a learning series. Every 6 weeks, we'll have a session where we'll be sharing hot topics in this space, and the next one will be on regenerative agriculture on the 1st of March. So we'll continue our experimentation in store and in digital ecosystems and sharing the learnings from different countries around the world and bringing that to consumers to help them get that impact that they want in their baskets. And that wraps up today's session. Of course, any questions that you have, no matter which organization you're a member of or not, you're an interested stakeholder, we'd love to continue the conversation, whether it's with Emily, myself, or Shay at the ECR network. We'd be happy to follow up. And I think for those of you who can stay on the line, we're going to try and see if we can open it up for questions, comments, or any counsel that you might have for us as we bring forward this work.
Thank you, Sharon. So please, if you have questions, it's time to have them in the chat. And thank you for all the speakers for